We're now on our last chapter, chapter 14, and that's on oligopolies. This is on the spectrum between monopolistic competition and monopolies. And to talk about some of the characteristics is that there's a few large firms in the industry, and if there's only two, we call that a duopoly. So if there's just two firms. They're selling either an identical or differentiated product. So an identical product might be things like steel or copper. They're all very similar. They're almost the same between companies, but there's just a few large ones selling it. A differentiated market, oligopoly, might be some like cell phone services, cable services, could be automobiles, even cell phone brands itself. All of these make similar things, but they have differences between them. And now we have something new here, this thing called mutual interdependence. What this means is that the behavior of firms directly affects all other firms in the industry, in this oligopoly. Now, it might be hard to think about, especially since we've talked about other types of market structures and that we didn't see any of this. And the reason why we haven't seen it already is, well, a monopoly only has one firm, right? So that won't actually affect other firms. And in pure competition and monopolistic competition, we just had too many firms. And they were so small that they didn't affect the market. Remember, they didn't themselves affect the prices or anything else in the market. Oligopolies will do just that. Now, when firms are thinking about making a decision as an oligopoly, they have to think about a few things, and they're thinking about how this is going to affect themselves, their profits, their sales, but also how it affects other firms. Is it going to make them start doing something differently? For instance, let's think of Coke and Pepsi. They're almost a duopoly, but there's still some other firms in the cola industry. And let's pretend it's the Super Bowl. And Pepsi typically does the halftime show, but they decide not to do it. And they're not going to advertise at all either in the Super Bowl. Now, Coke knows, hey, if Pepsi's not doing anything, I don't have to do much, but I have to do, maybe one good commercial and everyone's going to remember us. They're not even going to be thinking about Pepsi. And so their demand might change. They might get more sales and profits that way. But this mutual behavior leads to something sometimes called collusion or let's start with collusion. Sorry. Collusion is just where a group of firms come together and make decisions together, try to act like a monopoly. So they might decide to set their price high. So everyone in the group has to set it high. They might decide to limit their output, and all firms have to do the same. And if they have a official collusive agreement, these firms are just called cartels when it's something like official going on. And the biggest example for cartels in that makes sense here is OPEC. That is for oil. It's a group of countries, not firms, but same idea, who get together and talk about the price they're going to set in the market and how much they're going to sell. Now, cartels and collusion are illegal in the US. OPEC operates overseas, which is why they're allowed to operate. If you are, a president or CEO of a company and you're colluding with another company, you can get in trouble in the US and many other countries as well, Europe. And we use something called game theory to study firms and this mutual interdependence. Game theory is a branch of economics, and it studies the strategic behavior of people or firms or anything like that. So we can do things like look at firms' behaviors, but game theory also looks at subjects like dating and sports and everything in between. So game theory is very wide. It's not just on firms. You should have seen the video I put before this that talks about the prisoner's dilemma. We're going to talk about a different game theory problem here, but I wanted to have someone else introduce it for you. And so game theory does that, shows that prisoner's dilemma, shows that outcome. And you might remember in the video, they talked about this outcome. What is the outcome of the prisoner's dilemma? And that was something called the Nash equilibrium. Have you seen the movie A Beautiful Mind? That has to do with the John Nash that this is named after. And he actually used to live in Princeton. So he was nearby. All right, let's go on to the next example. Here, we're going to have two firms. Let me get a different color, just have something else. Orange instead. So we have two firms, and that's firms A and B here. And they're deciding whether or not to advertise or not. So remember we said like advertising can affect other firms' profits as well as your own. And in this case, I'm just going to go straight to the table. And for firm A, this is their decisions, whether they decide yes or no. For firm B, these are B's decisions, yes or no. And their outcome depends on which option, yes or no, the other is choosing as well as what they're choosing. So let's look at B's yes. If B chooses yes, they can get $300 or $700, but it depends what A picks to actually get to which one of these we're in, which one of these boxes. So if A also says yes, they both get $300, but if A says no, A gets $200 and B gets $700. So that's just an example of how to read this. If they both advertise, remember advertising can be costly. They're going to be spending money, but also getting money back from people wanting to buy their products and seeing them on TV and, getting a craving if they make food or something. And, they have to, what I'm trying to say is they make money and also have to pay some money to make it. If they both choose no, then they both earn $500. And that's the case just here because they're not spending that money on advertising. They save that. They still probably get some business since everyone knows them. There's only two firms in the industry, but they no longer maybe get that bump that they would get before. But they're still making positive profit, right? And then for like the other two, this depends. One says no and the other says yes, basically. Now, obviously, we would probably think they should both not advertise. That gives them both the best profit, $500. There's better profit for one firm, but not for the other firm. Now, if they collude and have some type of deal or they shake hands and say they're not going to advertise, well, that's not really something that's enforceable, right? There can't be a contract in the US to do this. It's illegal. So just having someone's word isn't always the greatest. And what happens is, say we're looking at B. They're making $500, but if they switch to advertising, they go from no to yes, well, we go up here and they make $700. So there's this incentive for them to cheat or cheat the agreement and get more money. But of course, the other person knows that and has the same option. So how to find the solution is we're going to just say that one firm, I'm going to pick A first, you can pick B though, and we say that they pick yes. So we already know they say yes. Now we want to look at B's options, and B's in green while A is in purple. If B says yes, B makes $300, and if B says no, they make $200. You want to select the highest here. When it came to the prisoner's dilemma, those numbers were years in prison, so we wanted it to be low. Here, these are profits, so we want them to be higher. Now, if A chooses no, though, if B chooses yes, they get that $700, and if they choose no, they only get $500. Again, we want to select the best idea, and in this case, it's $700. So we have two circles for B. And actually, firm B wants to select yes for either option. No matter what A does, B is always going to select yes. That's just how the numbers work out here. So now let's say that B chooses yes, and we want to see what A should do. So we're looking at the blue numbers, either 300 or 200. 300 is better, so we circle it. And if B chooses no, we still look at the blue. We are now looking between 700 and 500. 700 is better. Now the Nash equilibrium, NE, is where we have two circles in the same box. And that's going to be where they both choose yes. So I'm just putting yes, yes. Or you can say firm A, yes, firm B, yes. That's the same thing. So that means they're both going to advertise and they're going to make $300 in profit. While they could make more, this idea of changing your mind and getting more profit is there and affects both of their decisions in the end. So we end up with this solution that's not as great as maybe 500, but it's still better than losing out. All right, hope that makes sense. I'll talk to you soon, but if you have questions, let me know.